I came from North Dakota. I was born out there, and I was a junior in high school when my parents, my dad was a dairy farmer, and he bought the farm that's actually next to the church down there in Cost. Back in 1946, that was a beautiful big dairy farm. That's what he bought, and we moved down here right next to the church and started attending the Cost Church, and that was where I met Oliver. He was 4 years older, so he was already out of school, but still around and attending the church, and that's where I met him. And after high school, I had gone to Minneapolis, lived with another girlfriend, and I worked at General Mills, counted Betty Crocker coupons. and he was going to Trinity Bible College at the time down there, and let's see, then, well, we dated for a year or so, and were married in 1949. I was 18 and he was 22, so we were young. And then we both went to Trinity College in Chicago. Then that was at the time that the two schools combined, and they went to Chicago. So we were down in Chicago, both of us going to Trinity for a time, and then we went to Nebraska, and were there for a couple of years. Worked at a children's home in Nebraska that it was a free church-owned children's home, and during that time there, Oliver also pastored a little country church for a year there in Nebraska. And Steve was born when we lived in Nebraska. So we jokingly say that we got him at the children's home. But anyway, then we came back to Minnesota and ended up buying the farm, which is just across the woods here. For about 25 years, he farmed and had his egg business at the same time. He bought and sold eggs, candled and graded. The kids all remember, the older kids all remember helping to carton eggs and help with all of that. And he had egg routes down in St. Paul for, it was about 25 years that he worked at all of that and the farming. And he had mostly house-to-house routes, but the first years he also sold to restaurants and nursing homes and things like that. So he worked at that for about 25 years. And after that, when he gave up this egg business, he worked at the hospital in Chicago. He was an orderly there and loved that work, and he was loved by the people there because he was really good. He was in the extended care part, taking care of older people, and he worked there for I don't know, another 10 or 15 years until he retired in the 90s. But anyway, during that time, well, Pam was our second one. She was born in 53. And then Randy, and then Jeannie, and Joel and Dwight. So we had the 6 children, and I didn't work out of the home during, after that time, after we were married, but I was always busy. We had gardens, and I did a lot of freezing and canning vegetables and things. I did a lot of sewing, a lot of my clothing, and then for the girls especially, and for the boys too, I would make a lot of clothing. So I stayed very busy, and we were always very much involved in the church. The kids all would remember that very much. We were always at the church services and Sunday school on Wednesday nights. There would be prayer meeting and the youth meetings. Always very much involved in the church. And thinking about passing down our faith, that was all a part of it. But an important thing in the family, we always had devotions together, Bible reading and prayer. Every day we would, sit down together as a family and have Bible reading and prayer. And they that's something they remember of their dad. We lived on the farm place. It was in 1953, I think, when we bought the farm and lived over there it was in January of 1968. And that was a really big thing and a big move for all the family. We bought this house. I know the kids have good memories of the farmhouse too, but it was an older house, and it was great to move into a house that had a furnace with central heat. Over there we had space heaters, and but I know the older kids have good memories of living there at the farmhouse too. Joel and Dwight don't remember too much about that because Dwight was 4 years old and Joel was 7 years old when we moved here. But that was a great time, a wonderful time for us, a very special time to move here. And then we, but this was a house on 2 acres, but it was adjoining our farmland. So we kept the farm except, a few acres in the buildings we sold, but we still kept most of the farmland because it was a 100-acre farm that we had there. So we still had a lot of the farmland, and Oliver still did some farming along with, he still had the egg route during that time. And let's see, Steve graduated from high school that spring after we moved here, and things changed as the kids grew up and went off to school. One of the things that our kids would remember, and I think they remember a lot of sayings that their dad would use, but things weren't always easy or in abundance financially, but we never, we always got along fine. We weren't lacking. But one of the sayings that I think the girls both mentioned that when we were talking about it here, they remembered their dad would say, God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. We'll just ask him to sell another cow. And they remembered that saying that he would use. The Lord always took care of us. He always supplied our needs, and not necessarily supplying our wants, because sometimes our wants aren't even what we should have. We see that when we look at children. They have a lot of wants that wouldn't even be good for them if they had all their wants. But the Lord always provided. He always took care of us. And I hope that that's something that our children and grandchildren can remember, can think of as something that we passed on to them, that we can always depend on the Lord. He's going to take care of us and supply our needs, because He knows better than we know what's good for us and what we should have.